The year was 2147, and humanity had come a long way since its early days of staring up at the stars with nothing but curiosity. Space exploration had become more than just a dream. It was now a reality. Earth scientists and engineers had built listening stations on the moon, far away from the noise of human activity. These stations were designed to pick up signals from deep space, hoping to find proof that they weren't alone in the universe. For years, the stations picked up nothing but static and faint echoes of distant stars. But one day, everything changed. It started as a weak pulse, almost too faint to notice. At first, the technicians thought it was interference caused by solar winds or some glitch in their equipment. But when the signal repeated itself hours later, they realized this wasn't random noise. It was a pattern, deliberate and precise. The news spread quickly through the Lunar Research Hub, drawing the attention of some of the brightest minds working there. Among them were Daniel Carter, an astrophysicist known for his calm demeanor and sharp mind, and Rachel Monroe, a linguist, who specialized in decoding alien languages. Both were called into the main control room to analyze the mysterious transmission. Daniel stood in front of a large screen filled with lines of data scrolling past. His brow furrowed as he studied the patterns. "This isn't natural," he sighed, speaking softly but with authority. "Whatever this is, it's artificial. Someone or something is sending this." Rachel nodded, her eyes scanning the information. She pointed to certain sections of the signal. "Look here. There are repeating sequences, almost like ... words." Her voice trailed off as she leaned closer to the screen. "If we can isolate these patterns, maybe we can figure out what they mean." For weeks, the team worked tirelessly. They ran simulations, cross-referenced data, and tested every possible theory. It wasn't easy. The signal was fragmented, broken into pieces that didn't always make sense. But slowly, they began to piece together fragments of a message. What they found sent shockwaves through the research hub. "It's a distress call," Rachel announced one evening, her voice trembling slightly. She turned to face the others gathered in the room. A cry for help. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what this discovery meant. Humanity had spent centuries wondering if intelligent life existed beyond Earth. Now, not only had they found evidence, but that evidence suggested another species was in trouble. The implications were enormous. Daniel moved to stand beside Rachel, his expression serious. "We need to keep going," he said firmly. "If this is real, we can't ignore it." As the team continued their work, they managed to extract coordinates from the signal. The message came from a planet orbiting a dying star, located near the edge of the galaxy. The term Deathworld appeared multiple times in the transmission, though its exact meaning remained unclear. Was it a warning? A description of the planet itself? Or something else entirely? News of the discovery reached Earth within days. Governments, scientists, and ordinary people debated what to do next. Some argued that responding to the signal could be dangerous. What if it was a trap? Others believed it was humanity's duty to help, especially since the message clearly indicated desperation. After heated discussions, the United Earth Council made a decision. They would send a mission to investigate. The task of leading the expedition fell to Daniel and Rachel, along with Captain LaVar Hayes, a military officer known for her strategic thinking and leadership skills. Together, they assembled a small crew for the journey. Kyle Bennett, a skilled engineer, joined to handle technical issues. Emily Dawson, a biologist with expertise in extraterrestrial ecosystems, rounded out the team. Their vessel, the Pioneer Dawn, was one of the most advanced ships ever built, capable of traveling vast distances through hyperspace. As the launch date approached, excitement mingled with anxiety among the crew. None of them had ever undertaken a mission like this before. They were stepping into the unknown, venturing farther from Earth than anyone had gone. The stakes were high and failure wasn't an option. On the morning of departure, the crew gathered at the launch site. The Pioneer Dawn gleamed under the bright lights, its sleek design reflecting humanity's technological achievements. Friends, family, and colleagues watched as the team boarded the ship, offering final words of encouragement. Daniel took a moment to look back at the crowd, his heart heavy with both anticipation and fear. He knew this mission could change everything for better or worse. Once aboard, the crew strapped themselves into their seats as the engines roared to life. The ground trembled beneath them, and then, with a deafening boom, the ship lifted off. Through the windows, they watched Earth grow smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely. Ahead of them lay the vast emptiness of space, dotted with countless stars. The journey wouldn't be easy. Hyperspace travel required precise calculations, and even the smallest error could send them off course. For the first few days, the crew focused on monitoring the ship's systems and ensuring everything functioned properly. But as the novelty of space travel wore off, reality set in. Days turned into weeks, and the endless void outside became monotonous. Conversations grew quieter, and moments of tension occasionally flared between crew members. Despite the challenges, they pushed forward. Each person carried the weight of responsibility, knowing that the fate of the mission and perhaps humanity itself rested on their shoulders. They spent hours discussing what they might find when they reached the coordinates. Would the planet be habitable? Would the aliens still be alive? And if so, how would they communicate? One night, as the ship drifted silently through hyperspace, Rachel sat alone in the observation deck, staring out at the swirling colors of the cosmos. She thought about the message they had decoded, the word Deathworld echoing in her mind. Something about it unsettled her, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. Maybe it was the tone of the transmission, the raw desperation behind it. Or maybe it was the realization that, despite all their advances, humanity was still so small in the grand scheme of things. Eventually, she returned to her quarters where Daniel was already asleep. She lay down on her bunk, closing her eyes and trying to quiet her racing thoughts. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new uncertainties. All she could do was trust in herself and her team. Weeks passed, and finally the Pioneer Dawn emerged from hyperspace. Before them loomed the planet described in the signal. It was larger than Earth, with swirling purple clouds and jagged mountain ranges visible even from orbit. Sensors revealed extreme environmental conditions, violent storms, toxic atmospheres, and constant seismic activity. Despite the dangers, the crew prepared to descend to the surface. As they suited up and climbed into drop pods, Daniel spoke over the comms. "Remember, stay alert. We don't know what we're walking into." Rachel nodded, her heart pounding. This was the moment they had trained for, dreamed of, and feared. With a jolt, the pods detached from the ship and plummeted toward the planet below. The drop pods hit the surface of the planet with a jolt that rattled every bone in their bodies. Dust and debris swirled around them as the crew stepped out into an alien world unlike anything they had ever seen. The air shimmered with strange colors, and the ground beneath their boots felt uneven, cracked, and brittle. Towering mountains loomed in the distance, their jagged peaks piercing the sky. The horizon was painted in shades of purple and orange, lit by the dim glow of a dying star. Captain Lavarhaze was the first to speak. "Stay close," she ordered, her voice firm but calm. "We don't know what's out here." Daniel adjusted the visor on his helmet, scanning the area with a handheld scanner. "Atmosphere is toxic," he said, glancing at the readings. "No breathable air. Stick to your oxygen supplies." Rachel nodded silently, her eyes wide as she took in the desolate landscape. It was both beautiful and terrifying, like stepping onto another world entirely. Emily Dawson knelt down to examine the ground, brushing away loose dirt to reveal fragments of what looked like metal or some kind of synthetic material. "This place has been touched by intelligent life," she muttered, holding up a piece for the others to see. "These aren't natural formations." Kyle Bennett, the engineer, was already busy setting up a portable base station. He worked quickly, assembling equipment that would allow them to communicate with the Pioneer Dawn and analyze their surroundings more thoroughly. "Let's get this up and running," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "The sooner we figure out where we are, the better." As the team moved further from the landing site, they began to notice signs of ruins scattered across the barren terrain. Crumbling structures rose out of the dust, their shapes twisted and broken, as if ravaged by time and disaster. Some were partially buried, while others leaned precariously, ready to collapse at any moment. Rachel approached one of the larger ruins, her footsteps crunching against the dry ground. She ran her gloved hand along the surface of a wall, feeling the rough texture beneath her fingers. Strange symbols were etched into the stone, glowing faintly in the dim light. "These markings," Rachel whispered, her voice tinged with excitement. "They're similar to the ones in the signal. This must be where it came from." Daniel joined her, studying the symbols carefully. "Can you translate them?" he asked. "I'll try," Rachel replied, pulling out a small device to scan the inscriptions. As she worked, the rest of the team spread out to explore the area. Lavra kept watch, her hand resting on the weapon strapped to her side. Kyle fiddled with the base station, making sure it was stable, while Emily collected samples of soil and rock, hoping to learn more about the planet's ecosystem. The deeper they ventured into the ruins, the more eerie the atmosphere became. The wind carried strange whispers, soft and indistinct, as though the very air itself was trying to speak. Shadows danced along the walls, cast by the flickering light of their headlamps. Every sound made them jump, every movement caught their attention. It was clear that this place held secrets and dangers they couldn't yet understand. After hours of searching, they stumbled upon something extraordinary, a massive chamber hidden beneath the ruins. A narrow staircase led down into darkness, its steps worn smooth by countless feet over centuries. Lavra hesitated at the entrance, shining her light into the abyss below. "Stay alert," she warned again. "We don't know what's waiting for us." One by one, they descended into the chamber, their lamps cutting through the thick shadows. What they found inside left them speechless. The room was filled with rows of cryogenic pods, each containing a being suspended in stasis. Their forms were unlike anything human, slender, insectoid creatures with translucent skin and elongated limbs. Their faces were delicate, almost fragile, and their closed eyes seemed to radiate a faint, otherworldly glow. Emily approached one of the pods cautiously, her breath fogging up the inside of her helmet. "Are they alive?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're in stasis," Daniel replied, examining the controls on the side of the pod. "But the systems are failing. Without intervention, they won't last much longer." Rachel stepped forward, her heart pounding. She recognized the language written on the walls surrounding the pods. It matched the fragments of the SOS signal they had decoded. Her hands trembled as she traced the symbols with her fingers. "This is their story," she murmured. "Their warning." Lavra crossed her arms, her expression grim. "We need to decide what to do next. Reviving them could be dangerous. We don't know how they'll react or if they're even friendly." Daniel shook his head. "We can't just leave them here to die." "That's not why we came." The team debated quietly, weighing the risks and rewards of reviving one of the aliens. In the end, curiosity outweighed, found themselves staring at a creature that seemed both fragile and powerful. Its movements were slow and deliberate, as though every action required immense effort. Rachel knelt beside it, speaking softly in hopes of communicating. At first there was no response. But then the alien tilted its head slightly, its large, multifaceted eyes locking onto hers. "Zenara," it whispered, the sound barely audible through their helmets. Rachel repeated the name, pointing to herself and saying her own. Slowly, painfully, Zenara began to communicate, using a combination of gestures, sounds, and fragmented words that Rachel worked tirelessly to interpret. Over time they pieced together a tragic tale. Zenara explained that her people, the Valeth, had once thrived on this planet. They were brilliant engineers and scientists, capable of incredible feats. But their success came at a cost. In their pursuit of progress, they stripped the planet of its resources, triggering an ecological collapse that turned their home into the wasteland the humans now stood on. Desperate to survive, they sent out the SOS signal, hoping another species might find it and learn from their mistakes. But Zenara also warned of something else, something that still lurked on this planet. She called them threshers, monstrous predators that had evolved to hunt the remnants of the Valith population. These creatures were fast, cunning, and relentless, thriving in the harsh environment. Zinara's warning sent a chill through the group. They had seen no sign of these threshers yet, but the thought of encountering such predators filled them with dread. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply and the wind picked up, carrying with it an unsettling howl. The team set up camp near the ruins, huddling close for warmth and safety. They took turns keeping watch, their weapons ready. Outside the circle of their campfire's light, shadows moved, flickering, shifting. Watching, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. She glanced at Zinara, who lay weakly on a makeshift bed, her frail body struggling to adapt to the planet's current conditions. "Why did you stay in stasis?" Rachel asked gently. "Why didn't you leave?" Zinara's response was faint, but clear. "We hoped someone would come. Someone who could carry our legacy, someone who could change." Her words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. Humanity wasn't just here to save the Valith, they were here to learn, to ensure they didn't repeat the same mistakes. As the fire crackled and the wind howled outside, the crew realized the weight of their mission. This wasn't just about survival, it was about hope. Hope that humanity could rise above its flaws and build a better future not just for themselves, but for all life in the universe. And somewhere in the darkness beyond their camp, the threshers waited. The night grew colder and the howling wind outside the camp seemed to grow louder. Shadows moved just beyond the edge of the firelight, flickering like ghosts. The crew sat close together, their weapons within reach, their eyes darting toward every sound. Zinara lay quietly on her makeshift bed, her breathing shallow but steady. Rachel kept glancing at her, worried about how weak the alien seemed. She knew they couldn't keep her alive much longer without finding a way to stabilize her condition. Kyle was busy tinkering with one of the damaged defense drones they had brought along. It had been battered during their landing, but he believed it could still be useful if he could get it working again. His fingers moved quickly over the wires and circuits, his face illuminated by the glow of his tools. "Almost there," he muttered under his breath, though no one paid much attention. Everyone was too focused on staying alert. Emily sat nearby, examining samples she had collected earlier from the ruins. She held up a small vial of soil, squinting at it in the dim light. "This planet is dying," she said softly, almost to herself. "The ecosystem is completely broken. Whatever caused this, it wasn't natural." Daniel nodded, his expression grim. "Zinara said her people destroyed it. They took too much too fast. If we're not careful, Earth could end up like this someday." Lavra tightened her grip on her weapons, scanning the darkness around them. "Let's focus on surviving tonight first. Then we can worry about big-picture stuff." As if on cue, a low growl echoed through the air, sending chills down everyone's spines. The shadows outside the firelight shifted again, closer this time. Lavra stood up slowly, raising her weapon. "Stay sharp," she whispered. "Something's out there." Rachel felt her heart race as she grabbed a flashlight and aimed it into the darkness. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing nothing but swirling dust and jagged rocks. But then, for a brief moment, she thought she saw something, a flash of movement too quick to identify. She swung the light back, but whatever it was had vanished. "It's here." Zinara rasped suddenly, her voice barely audible, her large, multifaceted eyes widened with fear. "Threshers." Before anyone could react, a deafening roar split the air. From the shadows emerged a massive creature, its body sleek and serpentine, covered in thick, armored plates. Its mouth was filled with rows of razor-sharp teeth, and its glowing red eyes locked onto the group with predatory intent. Behind it, more shapes began to emerge, 3, 4, maybe 5 of the beasts, all moving with unnatural speed. "Take cover," Lavra shouted, firing her weapon at the nearest thresher. The blast hit its armored hide but didn't seem to do much damage. The creature lunged forward, forcing the team to scatter. Kyle grabbed the partially repaired drone and activated it, sending it flying toward the attackers. The drone fired a series of energy pulses, distracting two of the threshers long enough for the crew to regroup inside the ruins. Lavra led the way, her weapon trained on the entrance as the others followed closely behind. Once inside, they barricaded the doorway with debris, though they knew it wouldn't hold for long. "We need a plan," Daniel said urgently, his voice strained. "These things aren't going away." Emily pointed to the cryogenic pods in the chamber below. "What about reviving more of the Valeth? Maybe they can help us fight these creatures." Zinara shook her head weakly. "No, too dangerous, too late for my people." Her voice was faint but firm. "You must leave this place." Rachel knelt beside her, gripping her hand. "We're not leaving you, or your world. There has to be another way." Zinara hesitated, then gestured toward the walls of the chamber. "Terraforming machines stored deep below could restore balance. Drive threshers away." Daniel's eyes lit up. "If we can activate their terraforming technology, we might be able to change the environment enough to weaken these creatures." Lavra frowned. "That sounds risky. What if it makes things worse?" "It's our only shot," Kyle said, already heading toward a narrow staircase that led deeper into the ruins. "I'll go check it out." "I'm coming with you," Emily added, grabbing her sample kit. "If we can find biological data, it might help us understand how to use the machines." Lavra sighed but nodded. "Fine, Daniel, stay here with Rachel and Zinara. Keep them safe. We'll radio back when we find something." As Kyle and Emily disappeared down the stairs, Lavra stayed near the entrance, keeping watch. The threshers were still outside, pacing and growling, unable to break through the barricade but clearly waiting for an opportunity. Inside the chamber, Rachel worked to comfort Zinara, who was growing weaker by the minute. "Why did your people send the signal?" Rachel asked gently. "Why not try to escape?" Zinara managed a faint smile. "Hope, even in death. We wanted to warn others, to give knowledge, to save what we could not." Her words struck a chord with Rachel. Humanity had always been fascinated by the stars, dreaming of meeting other intelligent life. Now, faced with the remnants of a once great civilization, she realized just how fragile existence truly was. The Valeth's mistakes were a mirror of humanity's own potential future if they weren't careful. Hours passed, and the tension in the chamber was palpable. The threshers continued to prowl outside, occasionally slamming against the barricade. Each impact sent tremors through the structure, threatening to collapse the ruins entirely. Lavra kept her weapon ready, her eyes never leaving the entrance. Finally, Kyle's voice crackled over the comms. "We found the machines. They're powered down, but I think I can get them running. Emily's analyzing the controls now." "Hurry," Lavra replied. "We can't hold out much longer." Back in the chamber, Zinara's condition worsened. Her breathing became labored, and her glowing eyes dimmed. Rachel held her hand tightly, feeling a mix of sadness and determination. "Hold on," she urged. "Just a little longer." Zinara looked at her, her gaze soft but resolute. "You are strong, like my people once were. Do not repeat our mistakes." Before Rachel could respond, a loud crash echoed through the ruins. The barricade had given way. The threshers poured into the chamber, their roars shaking the very ground beneath their feet. Lavra opened fire immediately, her shots striking true but doing little to slow the beasts down. Daniel joined her, using a portable energy shield to block their attacks while Lavra reloaded. Just as it seemed all hope was lost, a deep rumbling sound filled the air. The ground trembled violently and the threshers froze, their glowing eyes darting around in confusion. Moments later, green mist began to seep from vents in the walls, spreading rapidly throughout the chamber. The creatures let out agonized screeches before retreating into the darkness. Fleeing the toxic gas. Kyle and Emily emerged from the stairway, coughing but triumphant. "Got it working," Kyle shouted over the noise. "The terraforming process has started." Lavra lowered her weapon, relief washing over her face. "Good work. Let's get out of here before the whole place collapses." The team gathered quickly, supporting Zinara as best they could. As they made their way back to the surface, the ruins around them groaned and shifted, the ancient structures giving way to the planet's changing environment. By the time they reached the drop pods, the landscape had already begun to transform. The toxic purple clouds were thinning, replaced by clearer skies and patches of green. Vegetation were starting to sprout from the cracked earth. Zinara gazed at the changes with a mixture of awe and sorrow. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "for everything." As the team prepared to launch back to the Pioneer Dawn, Zinara closed her eyes, her frail body finally succumbing to exhaustion. Rachel stayed by her side until the very end, tears streaming down her face. Though they had saved the planet, they had lost the last living member of the Valith. But Zinara's legacy lived on in the knowledge she had shared, in the lessons her people had left behind, and in the hope that humanity would do better. As the drop pods lifted off, carrying the crew back to their ship, Rachel stared out at the planet below. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, humanity could rise to the challenge. They had been given a second chance, a gift from a dying world, and they would not waste it. As the drop pods ascended back toward the Pioneer Dawn, the crew sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The mission had been a success, but it came at a cost. Zinara was gone, her frail body unable to withstand the harsh conditions of her dying world. Yet her final words lingered in their minds, a reminder of the responsibility they now carried. Humanity had been entrusted with the knowledge of the Valith, a treasure trove of scientific advancements and cultural history. It was up to them to use it wisely. The journey back to Earth would take several weeks, giving the crew time to reflect on everything they had experienced. Rachel spent most of her days in the ship's observation deck, staring out at the stars as they traveled through hyperspace. She replayed every moment of their time on Zethera, the ruins, the threshers, and Zinara's quiet strength. Her heart ached for the alien who had trusted them, even in her final moments. Daniel often joined her, sitting quietly beside her as they shared the weight of what they had witnessed. "We did the right thing," Daniel said one evening, breaking the silence. "Reviving her, activating the terraforming machines. We gave that planet a chance." Rachel nodded slowly, though her expression remained troubled. "But at what cost? The Valith are gone. Their civilization is over. All we have left is their legacy and the mistakes they made." Daniel sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Maybe that's the point. Maybe we're supposed to learn from their failures so we don't repeat them." Kyle and Emily were less reflective, focusing instead on studying the data they had collected. Kyle worked tirelessly in the engineering bay, examining fragments of Valith technology they had salvaged from the ruins. He marveled at their ingenuity, especially the terraforming machines that had begun restoring Zethera's environment. "If we could adapt this tech for Earth," he mused aloud, his voice filled with excitement, "we could solve so many problems: pollution, climate change, resource shortages." Emily nodded, poring over biological samples she had gathered from the planet. Their ecosystems were incredibly advanced before they collapsed. "If we can understand how they worked, maybe we can prevent the same thing from happening to us." Captain Lavar Hayes kept a close eye on her team, ensuring everyone stayed focused and healthy during the long journey home. She knew the psychological toll such a mission could take, especially after losing someone like Zinara. Though she rarely showed it, Lavara felt the weight of leadership heavily on her shoulders. Every decision she had made, from reviving Zinara to activating the terraforming machines, had consequences. She couldn't help but wonder if she had done enough to protect her crew. One afternoon, Lavra called a meeting in the ship's common area. The entire team gathered around a holographic table where projections of Zethera's transformation played in vivid detail. Greenery spread across the once barren landscape, rivers flowed again, and the toxic atmosphere began to clear. It was a remarkable recovery, proof that the Valith's technology still held immense power. "We need to talk about what happens next," Lavra began, her tone serious but calm. "When we get back to Earth, the United Earth Council will want answers. They'll want to know everything we learned, and they'll want access to the Valith archives." Daniel frowned. "Do you think they'll use it responsibly? Or will They exploit it like the Valeth did? That's why we have to be careful, Rachel interjected. Zinara trusted us not just to save her planet, but to honor her people's legacy. We owe it to her to make sure their knowledge is used. For good, Lavara nodded. Agreed? But we also need to prepare for resistance. Not everyone will see it our way. Some might argue that humanity deserves to benefit from the Valeth advancements without worrying about the risks. The conversation grew heated as the crew debated how best to handle the situation. Kyle argued for immediate implementation of the technology, believing it could revolutionize life on Earth. Emily countered that rushing into anything could lead to disaster, echoing Zinara's warnings about unchecked progress. Daniel and Rachel sided with caution, emphasizing the importance of learning from the Valeth's mistakes rather than repeating them. By the end of the meeting, they had reached a tentative agreement. They would present the Valeth's knowledge to the Council but insist on strict regulations to prevent misuse. They would also advocate for global cooperation, urging leaders to prioritize sustainability and ethical practices. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. As the days passed, the crew prepared for their return to Earth. They organized their findings, creating detailed reports and presentations to share with the Council. Rachel spent hours translating more of the Valeth language, uncovering stories, philosophies, and lessons that reinforce the importance of balance and harmony. Daniel helped her compile the information into a format that would be easy for others to understand. Finally, the Pioneer Dawn emerged from hyperspace, Earth appearing as a bright blue dot against the vastness of space. The sight filled the crew with mixed emotions. On one hand, they were relieved to be home. On the other, they knew the real challenge lay ahead. Convincing humanity to embrace the Valeth's wisdom wouldn't be easy, especially in a world driven by greed and competition. As the ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, landing smoothly at a secure facility, the crew braced themselves for what was to come. Reporters and officials awaited them, eager to hear their story. Lavra stepped forward first, addressing the crowd with confidence. We went to Zethera seeking answers, she began. What we found was a lesson, a warning from a species that destroyed itself in pursuit of progress. But we also found hope. Hope that humanity can rise above its flaws and build a better future. Rachel and Daniel followed, sharing their experiences and insights. They spoke of Zinara's courage, the Thresher's ferocity, and the Valeth's tragic downfall. Emily presented her research on the planet's ecosystems, while Kyle demonstrated the potential applications of the recovered technology. Together, they painted a picture of both danger and opportunity. The response was overwhelming. Some hailed the mission as a turning point for humanity, a chance to rewrite history and avoid the mistakes of the past. Others dismissed it as idealistic nonsense, arguing that progress always came at a price. Debates raged across the globe, sparking conversations about sustainability, ethics, and the future of human civilization. In the months that followed, the crew dedicated themselves to spreading the Valeth's message. They traveled the world speaking at conferences, universities, and government summits. Slowly but surely, attitudes began to shift. New policies were implemented to address environmental issues, and international partnerships formed to ensure responsible use of the Valeth's technology. For Rachel, the journey became deeply personal. She wrote books and articles sharing Zinara's story and the lessons she had learned. She often thought about the alien who had placed her trust in humanity, wondering if she would have been proud of the changes taking place. Daniel joined her efforts, using his expertise to develop educational programs aimed at inspiring future generations to think critically about their impact on the planet. Kyle and Emily continued their work in science and engineering, collaborating with teams around the world to adapt Valeth innovations for Earth's needs. Their breakthroughs brought tangible improvements: cleaner air, healthier oceans, and renewable energy sources that reduced reliance on finite resources. Lava returned to her role in the military, advocating for peace and cooperation rather than conflict and division. Years later, as Rachel stood on a balcony overlooking a bustling city, she felt a sense of pride. The skyline was dotted with green buildings, solar panels, and wind turbines. Parks and gardens flourished where concrete jungles once stood. Children played beneath clear skies, laughing and dreaming of a brighter tomorrow. Humanity had taken its first steps toward a sustainable future. Guided by the lessons of a distant world, she remembered Zanara's final words: "Hope is the greatest gift we leave behind." And for the first time in centuries, humanity dared to believe in a better world, not just for themselves, but for all life in the universe. Years had passed since the crew of the Pioneer Dawn returned to Earth, but their mission remained a cornerstone of humanity's collective memory. The lessons from Zethera and the Valeth's tragic downfall had sparked a global movement unlike anything seen before. Cities transformed, industries adapted, and nations worked together in ways that once seemed impossible. Rachel Monroe often found herself reflecting on how far they had come, and how much farther they still had to go. Rachel now spent most of her time traveling between continents, speaking at conferences and meeting with world leaders. Her lectures were filled with stories of Zanara, the Valeth, and the fragile beauty of Zethera. She carried a holographic recording of the planet's transformation, showing audiences the barren wasteland it had been and the lush, thriving ecosystem it was becoming. "This is what happens when we choose balance over greed," she would say, her voice steady but passionate. "This is proof that we can heal what we've broken." Daniel Carter joined her on many of these trips, using his expertise in astrophysics to explain the science behind the Valeth's technology. Together, they inspired millions to think differently about humanity's place in the universe. Schools began teaching courses based on their findings, and universities established programs dedicated to sustainable innovation. A new generation of scientists, engineers, and thinkers emerged, driven by the belief that progress didn't have to come at the expense of the planet. Kyle Bennett became one of the leading figures in adapting Valeth technology for Earth. His breakthroughs revolutionized energy production, transportation, and agriculture. Solar panels became more efficient, electric vehicles replaced gas-powered cars, and vertical farms sprouted in urban centers, feeding populations while reducing land use. Kyle often joked that he was just following Zanara's advice: use what you have wisely. But deep down, he knew the work was about more than technology. It was about changing mindsets. Emily Dawson focused on biology and ecology, studying how the Valeth's terraforming machines had restored Zethera's environment. Her research led to groundbreaking discoveries about ecosystems and biodiversity. She worked with governments to implement conservation programs, restoring damaged habitats and protecting endangered species. Forests regrew, rivers ran clean again, and wildlife populations rebounded. Emily liked to remind people that every living thing was connected, lessons she had learned from the ruins of the Valeth's world. Captain Lavra Hayes retired from active duty but continued to serve as an advocate for peace and cooperation. She traveled the globe, urging nations to set aside differences and focus on shared goals. Under her guidance, the United Earth Council expanded its reach, fostering partnerships between countries and organizations. Conflicts over resources diminished as renewable technologies reduced scarcity. Lavra often said, "We're stronger together than we are apart," echoing the unity the crew had shown during their mission. Despite the progress, challenges remained. Some corporations resisted change, clinging to outdated practices that prioritized profit over sustainability. Others argued that humanity should focus on space exploration rather than fixing problems on Earth. These debates sometimes grew heated, but Rachel and her team never wavered in their resolve. They reminded everyone that the Valeth story was a cautionary tale not just for Earth, but for any world humanity might encounter in the future. One day, Rachel received an invitation to visit a remote island where a special project was underway. Curious, she boarded a small plane and flew to the location. When she arrived, she was greeted by Emily, who led her to a secluded beach surrounded by dense jungle. There, standing proudly against the horizon, was a monument unlike anything Rachel had ever seen. The structure was tall and elegant, made of shimmering metal and glass. Its design incorporated elements from both human and Valeth architecture. blending the two seamlessly. Engraved on its surface were symbols from the Velith language, alongside translations in English and other major languages. At the base of the monument was a plaque that read asterisk to the Velith, whose legacy taught U.S. Hope. May we honor their memory by building a better future for all life. Asterisk tears welled up in Rachel's eyes as she approached the monument. This is beautiful, she whispered, running her fingers along the cool surface. How did you manage? Emily smiled softly. It wasn't just me. People from all over the world contributed, artists, engineers, scientists. We wanted to create something that would remind everyone of what we've learned. As Rachel stood there, gazing at the monument, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. Humanity hadn't just survived. It had grown. It had taken the Velith's warnings to heart and used them to forge a path forward. For the first time, Rachel truly believed that the mistakes of the past wouldn't define the future. Later that evening, Rachel sat on the beach, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky turned shades of orange and pink, mirroring the colors of Zeth's skies. She thought about Zenara and the trust the alien had placed in them. Though Zenara was gone, her spirit lived on in the monument, in the changes sweeping across Earth, and in the hearts of those who remembered her. Rachel pulled out a small device she always carried with her. It contained recordings of Zenara's voice, translated messages from the Velith archives, and images of Zevir's transformation. She pressed play, listening to Zenara's final words one more time. Hope is the greatest gift we leave behind. Closing her eyes, Rachel let the ocean breeze wash over her. She imagined Zenara standing beside her, looking out at the waves. In her mind, she thanked the alien for everything, for her courage, her wisdom, and her faith in humanity. Without her, none of this would have been possible. Back on Zethera, the terraforming process continued to reshape the planet. The Threshers, unable to adapt to the changing environment, retreated deeper into the wilderness, their numbers dwindling. New forms of life emerged, thriving in the restored ecosystems. Rivers flowed freely, forests stretched endlessly, and the air grew sweet and breathable. The planet was healing, carrying the memory of its creators within its soil, its waters, and its skies. On Earth, the influence of the Velith spread beyond technology and science. Artists painted murals depicting the crew's journey, musicians composed songs inspired by Zenara's sacrifice, and writers penned novels exploring the themes of responsibility and renewal. Humanity's culture shifted, embracing values of sustainability, empathy, and cooperation. Children learned about the stars not as distant points of light, but as places where life could exist and where lessons could be shared. Decades later, Rachel stood on a stage in front of thousands of people, accepting an award for her contributions to global change. Her hair had turned gray and lines marked her face, but her eyes still sparkled with determination. As she accepted the trophy, she looked out at the crowd and smiled. "We didn't do this alone," she said, her voice strong despite her age. "We owe everything to a species that no longer exists, the Velith. They gave us their knowledge, their warnings, and their hope. And now it's our turn to pass that hope on to our children, to future generations, and to anyone else who dreams of reaching for the stars." The audience erupted into applause, but Rachel barely heard it. Her thoughts drifted back to Zethera, to Zenara, and to the moment they had activated the terraforming machines. She remembered the look in Zenara's eyes, a mixture of sadness and pride, as she entrusted humanity with her people's legacy. As Rachel left the stage, she felt a sense of peace. The road ahead would still have obstacles, but humanity had proven it could rise to the challenge. They had taken the Velith's gift and turned it into something meaningful. They had chosen hope over despair, unity over division, and life over destruction. That night, Rachel returned to her home, a cozy house overlooking the ocean. She sat on her porch, sipping tea as the stars twinkled above. Somewhere out there, billions of miles away, Zethera continued to heal. And here on Earth, humanity continued to grow. Rachel closed her eyes, letting the sound of the waves lull her into a peaceful sleep. For the first time in years, she dreamed of Zenara not as a frail, dying creature, but as a vibrant being standing tall and smiling. In her dream, Zinara reached out her hand and Rachel took it, feeling a warmth that filled her with joy. When Rachel woke the next morning, she knew one thing for certain: the Valeth legacy would live on forever. Their story had become humanity's story, a story of resilience, redemption, and hope. And as long as people remembered that, the future would always shine bright.